What if the wildest ideas of British sci-fi from the swinging 60s weren't fiction, but blueprints? Back when the Beatles ruled the airwaves and London fogged over in mystery, filmmakers were already dreaming about our future satellites, computers, climate shifts, even artificial minds. Most people laughed them off. But decades later, many of those visions came alarmingly true. So buckle up, because these 12 British prophecies didn't just imagine tomorrow. They became it. Number 12. The Day the Earth Caught Fire, 1961. Here's how British cinema broke a sweat before climate change was even a phrase. The Day the Earth Caught Fire told a terrifyingly believable story. Nuclear testing pushes Earth off its axis, sending temperatures soaring, ice caps melting, and London drowning in heat haze. Sounds familiar? That's because it eerily mirrors the world headlines we read half a century later. Director Val Guest filmed a London where newspapers melted in reporters' hands, water was rationed, and skies blazed orange. No monsters, no aliens, just science gone wrong and governments too slow to act. What made it sting wasn't the fantasy, but the frightening realism. Guest even had journalists from the Real Daily Express play themselves, anchoring the chaos and truth. In 1961, audiences thought it was melodrama. Today, it feels like a warning we ignored. Rising seas? Check. Heat waves turning cities into ovens? Double check. And the final image of church bells ringing as the world edges toward a second sunrise hits harder than ever. If Hollywood gave us panic about asteroids and alien attacks, Britain quietly predicted something far more human, our own climate catching fire. Not with lasers or explosions, but with everyday denial. Turns out, the most prophetic sci-fi wasn't loud. It was the one that whispered, "What if we did this to ourselves?" Number 11. Children of the Damned, 1964. Imagine a classroom of silent, wide-eyed kids who can control minds not from outer space, but from advanced evolution itself. Children of the Damned, the chilling follow-up to Village of the Damned, asked a question that feels uncomfortably modern. What happens when intelligence outgrows empathy? In 1964, it sounded like supernatural nonsense. But watch it now, and you'll see the outlines of debates about genetic engineering, designer offspring, and the ethics of shaping human potential. These silver-eyed children weren't born from radiation or fantasy. They were experiments in the very idea of improvement. Director Anton Leder staged it like a social experiment more than a horror film. Governments panic. Scientists argue. The children cooperate across national borders, something the adults can't manage. It was a quiet prophecy about how humanity would one day tinker with genetics, clone animals, and even edit DNA itself. Back then, such ideas lived in pulp magazines. Now they live in laboratories. The real genius of Children of the Damned is its moral twist. The kids aren't villains, they're mirrors. They show us what happens when progress outruns compassion. In a century obsessed with intelligence, artificial or otherwise, this old black and white film suddenly feels ahead of its time. Who would have thought a modest British sequel from 1964 would end up predicting our ethical growing pains half a century early? Number 10. The War Game, 1966. Before disaster movies became blockbusters, Britain made one so real it was banned from television for 20 years. The War Game wasn't entertainment. It was a documentary-style nightmare about what might happen if a nuclear blast struck southern England. And it turned out to be one of the most eerily accurate forecasts of how modern society would handle a global crisis. Director Peter Watkins shot it like a news report. Interviewers, chaos, emergency shelters, all filmed in stark black and white. The BBC called it too horrifying for the public. But what's fascinating is how right it was about psychology. It predicted panic buying, misinformation, official denial, and entire towns breaking down from fear. Decades later, during worldwide emergencies, those same patterns repeated almost exactly, only this time, for real. When it finally aired in 1985, audiences were stunned at how dated it wasn't. The dialogue about civil defense, mass dislocation, and media control could have been pulled from modern headlines. Even its warning about emotional trauma long before the term post-traumatic stress was common was chillingly insightful. Watkins didn't build spaceships or monsters. He built a mirror. And that's what made the War Game prophetic. It showed that the end of the world wasn't going to come from aliens or explosions in space. It would come from ordinary people trying to survive their own systems. Number 9. Invasion, 1966. When you hear British invasion, you might think of the Beatles. But Invasion, a small yet sharp film from 1966, tackled another kind entirely, and somehow foresaw our modern obsession with borders, viruses, and identity checks. The story begins when an alien crash lands near a rural hospital. The staff believes he's human until they notice his odd physiology, 2 hearts, strange blood, and mysterious language. Before long, more visitors arrive, claiming to be chasing a dangerous fugitive. But who's the real threat? The twist. The alien patient is actually peaceful, while the others are the aggressors, disguised as officials. Beneath the sci-fi shell, Invasion quietly predicted the paranoia of border control and biocontainment. Its doctors isolate the patient, quarantine the building, and argue over jurisdiction. Sound familiar? Decades later, the same moral dilemmas echoed during global outbreaks and immigration debates: who gets to decide, who belongs, and who gets locked out. Director Alan Bridges used minimalist sets and eerie silence, relying on tone instead of spectacle. It's not a loud film, but it's unsettlingly modern. The sterile corridors, the fear of contamination, the distrust of outsiders all mirror anxieties that would define the 21st century. When critics dismissed Invasion as slow, they missed its foresight. It wasn't predicting aliens, it was predicting bureaucracy. And as we now know, that's the scarier monster. Number 8. The Man Who Haunted Himself, 1970. Technically, this one barely squeaks into the 60s, but its soul is pure late 60s paranoia. The Man Who Haunted Himself starred Roger Moore in a double role long before digital doubles were even a concept. He plays Harold Pelham, a rigid businessman who begins seeing his exact duplicate, living his life signing deals, driving his car, even replacing him at home. At first glance, it's a psychological thriller about identity, but look closer, and it's almost prophetic. Decades before the internet, before deepfakes or cloned voices, the film imagined a man losing control of his image, his data, if you will, to something that looked and acted exactly like him. Today, that's not horror. That's Tuesday online. Director Basil Dearden shot London like a sleek machine, filled with mirrors and reflections. The more Pelham fights his duplicate, the more he dissolves into confusion. Sound familiar? Modern society faces a similar crisis: virtual selves that can exist, act, and even deceive without us. From stolen identities to synthetic likenesses, Pelham's nightmare has gone digital. What's tragic is how the film was overlooked when released. Audiences wanted Bond-style action, not existential dread. Yet Moore called it one of his favorite performances, and rightly so. Watching it now feels like watching the birth of an idea we're still wrestling with. What happens when your reflection starts living a life of its own? Number 7. Quatermass and the Pit, 1967. Before Alien, before X-Files, Britain already cracked the code for ancient astronauts. Quatermass and the Pit didn't just predict alien archaeology, it practically invented it. Nigel Neal's screenplay imagined a London underground dig uncovering a buried spacecraft that turns out to be millions of years old. Inside are the fossilized remains of insect-like creatures from Mars who once influenced early humans. That idea, extraterrestrial visitors shaping evolution, became mainstream decades later, from best-selling books about chariots of the gods to actual scientific speculation about panspermia. The film's mix of science, folklore, and psychology was shocking for its time. Instead of green invaders, it suggested that we are the aliens' legacy carriers of their instincts for violence and fear. Director Roy Ward Baker treated it like a mystery more than a monster movie. As London trembles and magnetic fields send citizens into madness, it becomes clear that humanity's worst enemy might be its own buried programming. Fast forward 50 years, and geneticists talk about ancestral memory and evolutionary triggers language that would have fit perfectly in Neal's script. At its core, Quatermass and the Pit predicted the fusion of archaeology, genetics, and cosmic theory that now fills documentaries and late-night podcasts alike. It warned that the ghosts of our past might not be spiritual, but biological. And the eeriest part? That subway dig wasn't just fiction. It was filmed in real abandoned tunnels beneath London. Sometimes, the monsters under the city aren't imagined. They're waiting to be unearthed. Number 6. The Damned, 1963. Here's one the censors didn't know what to do with. The Damned looks like a rebellious biker flick, but underneath it hides one of the most chillingly accurate sci-fi parables of the decade. The plot? A group of radioactive children, raised in secret by the government, immune to fallout, but trapped underground for their own safety. Director Joseph Losey, an American exile working in Britain, made a film that predicted the moral maze of human experimentation. These children aren't mutants or monsters, they're experiments in survival. The adults argue whether to protect them or study them, while the kids just want to see sunlight. It's haunting, especially knowing what history would later reveal about real-life radiation research and hidden testing. But what makes The Damned prophetic isn't the science, it's the psychology. It foresaw a future where fear of catastrophe drives governments to make unthinkable choices, where innocence is sacrificed in the name of protection. That theme feels painfully current whenever safety and secrecy collide. The film flopped when released, partly because no one knew how to market. Was it a horror, a drama, a warning? Only decades later did audiences realize how forward-thinking it was. The idea of engineered children born for a dangerous world became a staple of dystopian storytelling. The Damned might have been hidden in the archives for years, but its prophecy that the next generation would inherit our mistakes couldn't stay buried forever. Number 5. The Power Game, Cat's Cradle, 1969. Now for a deep cut from British television, The Power Game. In its final season came an episode titled Cat's Cradle, a story that sounded like dry business drama but quietly predicted something huge: artificial intelligence running corporate decisions. The show followed executive John Wilder, a ruthless industrial strategist. In Cat's Cradle, his company experiments with a computer program that can forecast markets and advise management. At first, it's just a clever gimmick. Then the algorithm starts suggesting ruthless, profit-driven actions, laying off staff, cornering resources, even manipulating rivals. Sound a little modern? In 1969, this was pure imagination. Today, predictive software runs global finance. Companies make real decisions from algorithms that learn behavior and anticipate human error. Wilder's fictional creation became our reality, except it's not on magnetic tape anymore, it's in the cloud. What makes the episode remarkable is how early it understood the moral trap. The characters debate, if the machine makes the best decisions, who's really in charge, the humans or the data? That conversation has aged like prophecy. You could swap Wilder's office for a tech boardroom, change the machine's blinking lights to an AI dashboard, and the script would barely need editing. Cat's Cradle wasn't flashy, but it caught a glimpse of the 21st century's favorite illusion: control. The more power we give to machines, the less we can honestly say we're the ones pulling the strings. The Power Game saw it coming before Silicon Valley even had a map. Number 4. Doctor Who, The War Machines, 1966. Of course, Doctor Who had to show up somewhere. Long before smartphones, digital assistants, or online surveillance, the Doctor faced Wotan, a supercomputer in London that decided humanity was too foolish to run the world. Its plan: link every machine on Earth into one global network and take over. Broadcast. In 1966, the War Machines practically invented the internet villain trope. A talking computer inside the newly built post office tower predicts that humans will depend so completely on technology that one intelligent system could seize control. At the time, audiences thought it was delightful nonsense. Now, it reads like an instruction manual for modern anxiety. The show even got the geography right. The real post office tower became a hub for Britain's early telecom systems, the literal network that would evolve into digital communications. Wotan's command centers sound suspiciously like today's data hubs. It's hypnotized human servants? That's us refreshing our screens at 3 in the morning. But the most haunting detail is how calmly everyone accepts it until it's too late. The War Machines didn't just imagine a rogue computer, it predicted our willingness to hand over control for convenience. The Doctor unplugged Wotan with a few dramatic wires. We, on the other hand, might not even notice if our algorithmic overlords decide to rewrite our to-do lists. For a show made on cardboard sets and tea breaks, it nailed the mood of the digital age, curious, arrogant, and one bad update away from chaos. Number 3. The Prisoner, 1967. Few shows aged as strangely or as accurately as The Prisoner. Patrick McGoohan's cult masterpiece turned paranoia into art. Its nameless spy wakes up in The Village, a sunny seaside community where everyone's watched, numbered, and psychologically manipulated into obedience. No bars, no guards, just constant surveillance. At the time, it felt like surreal allegory. Today, it looks like a documentary. McGoohan foresaw the trade we'd make between comfort and privacy. In The Village, residents are tracked, profiled, and distracted by cheerful propaganda. There's even a constant news feed of events designed to keep them docile decades before smartphones or social media existed. Shot in the dreamy coastal town of Port Merion, the show's bright colors hid a grim truth. This was a prison built on information, not walls. And that's exactly where modern life has arrived. Data collection, facial recognition, targeted ads. The Village's methods just got friendlier interfaces. What made The Prisoner prophetic wasn't the tech, but the psychology. It warned that the most effective control doesn't come from fear, but from self-participation. People choose surveillance when it makes them feel safe. McGoohan's famous line, "I am not a number, I am a free man," still echoes, because deep down, we know the Village won. In the end, The Prisoner wasn't predicting computers or satellites. It was predicting us happily surrendering freedom for the illusion of order, one tap at a time. Number 2. Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, 1969. Leave it to the late 60s to turn space exploration into an existential riddle. Journey to the Far Side of the Sun, also known as Doppelganger, imagine that scientists discover a hidden twin planet orbiting directly opposite Earth invisible because it always mirrors our orbit around the Sun. A bold idea then, a cosmic metaphor now. When astronauts travel there, they crash and awaken in what seems like home until they realize every word, every clock, and every movement is reversed. It's Earth's mirror version, a duplicate reality. In 1969, it was dismissed as stylish nonsense. But fast forward, and modern science really did start discussing mirror universes, multiverses, and simulation theory. Made by the creators of Thunderbirds, the film used practical effects that still look beautiful today. What's wild is how its central question has resurfaced in physics. If symmetry defines the universe, could a mirrored version of everything exist somewhere unseen? Journey to the Far Side of the Sun took that concept decades before particle scientists used words like antimatter world. Even its visual metaphors, screens reflecting screens, men losing themselves in technology feel like eerie previews of virtual reality and digital doubles. The idea that reality could flip, and you'd never notice until it's too late, hits harder in the age of deepfakes and parallel timelines on social media. At its core, the film asked the question science still can't answer. If we met our mirror selves, would we even recognize them? Maybe that's why this forgotten British gem still lingers, because half a century later, the reflection still stares back. Number 1. 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968. Yes, it's technically a British-American co-production, but filmed at Shepperton and Pinewood, with British crews who built the future by hand. And what a future it was. 2001, A Space Odyssey didn't just predict technology, it shaped it. When Stanley Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke crafted HAL 9000, they created the blueprint for modern artificial intelligence: calm voice, logical reasoning, and chilling self-confidence. Back in 1968, computers were room-sized and clunky. Yet here was a machine that could talk, think, and even refuse orders. Sound familiar? The film also foresaw video calls, voice-activated systems, tablet-like screens, and commercial space travel. Clarke based his predictions on real aerospace research, but Kubrick filmed it with eerie realism, sterile spacecraft interiors that look identical to today's space station footage. Even the flat-screen monitors were mocked up with hand-painted visuals that accidentally anticipated modern operating systems. But perhaps the most prophetic element wasn't HAL or the gadgets, it was the tone. Kubrick understood that the future wouldn't feel shiny or loud, it would feel quiet. Humans surrounded by machines, moving with precision but without wonder. The loneliness of progress. Half a century later, Hal's calm apology, "I'm afraid I can't do that," still chills because it's no longer fantasy. It's the anxiety of every smart device, every voice assistant that listens a little too well. 2001 didn't just predict technology's rise, it predicted our emotional dependence on it. A prophecy not of circuits, but of silence. So there you have it, 12 British visions that peered into tomorrow and found us. From haunted doubles to talking computers, from psychic children to global networks, 60s sci-fi didn't just dream, it diagnosed. Maybe that's what makes it timeless. It saw the human patterns behind the technology. So the next time an old black and white reel warns about the future, don't laugh. It might not be fiction. It might just be early reporting.